Liz here, and we are at EMO's Creative Studio, where everything you create is beautiful because you created it. So today we're going to continue with our journey video on how I'm showing you how I make a rag quilt. While we were away, we actually, and I don't know why I'm saying we, I actually had some extra squares left over, and I made a mini, oh, I have to cut this. I made a mini blanket so I can use it in the car to cover my legs. I haven't washed it yet. I was going to wait until I wash the big one. So in today's part 3 video, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I put together the squares, and let me just move the camera so that you can see what I'm talking about. Here's my pile. Here's my pile, and I'm just going to bring it down so you can see. And what I'm going to show you is that I might have briefly mentioned it in part 2, but I have the blocks already put together in the directions that I want for each row. I think each row I said I had 7 blocks of 10-inch square, and I've numbered each row. I start at 1, and I believe the last one is 10. So it's going to be a pretty long, somewhat wide quilt. I'm very excited. I hope it comes together really well. Again, I made these numbers using a fusible interfacing along with muslin, and then I went out and bought the iron-on numbers. Something about the iron-on numbers. Once you iron them on, try to make sure you don't put warm iron to it, because this is what will happen. You'll lose some of your print. It'll come off. So you got to be really careful. Once you put them on, you put it on, I believe, with the paper side facing you, and you just iron it on and then peel off the paper. So let's go ahead and start putting these things together. I'm just going to push my pile to the corner. I'm going to take row 1 down. I'm going to unclip the whole row, and I'm going to start putting my rows together. I am not going to remove the number that tells me the row position, because I want to keep that in place until after everything is put together. So what I want to do is I want to take this block and this block, and I want to sew it back sides together. I want to put it in my machine, and I want to make at least a 3/4 to an inch seam going down this way. So let me take you to the machine and show you how I'm going to put these rows together. I'm sitting at the machine now, and I have my first row nestled on my lap. I'm going to take block 1 from row 1 and block 2 back sides together, so it's a print and a solid that I'm sewing together. I am going to see on my machine that I have a 5/8 marking, and the end of this mark is probably 1 1/4 inches maybe, so somewhere between that marking and the end of this marking and this 5 inches where I'm going to try to keep my sewing. I also know that I have about 1 inch from the edge of the fabric to where I feel my batting. So I'm going to go ahead, my needle's already in the down position. I'm going to put my 2 blocks up against the needle. I can't really sew super fast because of the walking foot. So, and I'm not going to back stitch on any of the ends, because once you sew everything, it will lock. Once you sew all the blocks together and then put the rows together and then sew around the edge, that will lock all of your stitches into place. So here we go. Quick sewing. And now I've done my first block put together. I'm going to take my next block. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but I decided to change it up a little. So instead of having alternating blocks in each row, I'm going to be alternating the blocks instead of having alternating blocks within the row, I'm going to be alternating the blocks in each row. That means this first row, the blocks are going to be horizontal. The lines, I should say, are going to be horizontal. And in the next row, the lines are going to be vertical. So let me put together a couple of more blocks in row 1, show you what it looks like. And instead of dragging you through the entire time of me putting this together, I'll come back on and off to show you my process. So again, I'm working on row 1, putting together, attaching the third block to the row. Okay. And now I've got the third block on. Remember when I was saying that I didn't know if I was going to square off my blocks or not? I decided that I'm not going to. I'm just going to match my blocks the best way that I can, because in reality I'm going to be cutting these every 3/4 to an inch to make that ragged look. Then we're going to wash it. When the fabric curls up, you're not going to notice that it's not even. Might even give it some more body. So I am now attaching block 4. Oh, remember I was having a lot of problems with the thread breaking? Well, after investigating and looking it up, it turns out that I had a burr on the needle. So I went ahead and changed the needle. And since I've changed the needle, I don't think I've had any breakage on my thread. But I got my fingers crossed that I don't have that problem while I'm sewing all the blocks together. All right, I'm going to be attaching block, I believe this is block number 5. I'm going to do it all the way up here, and want to make sure that my other blocks are not caught underneath. And here we go. Oops! My thread came flying off because I'm going so fast. All right, let me try this again. All right. I am now going to attach the next block, which is a solid, and I believe that's block 6. Again, edges together. I'm not pinning. If you want to pin because you'll feel a little bit more secure, that's okay. Or you can use clips. Again, my opinion, because of my experience, is I rather use the clips because pins tend to distort your fabric. I've learned that from experience. So your choice, either pins or clips to hold your edges together. Because I'm only sewing 10 inches, I feel comfortable that I don't have to sew. And the thread broke because the thread came out. I don't have to put any pins or clips in my work right now because it's such a short amount, and I feel confident that it will come out okay. All right, I need to see, I said something and it got all jazzed up. Let me go ahead and try to thread this. Sorry. Try to thread this while we're still filming. Make sure everything is in its place. I know you're going to think, oh my gosh, she's wasting thread, but I need it to be pretty sharp when I go to stick it into the hole. Hopefully I can do it. One try. Sorry about my head. And eureka, I did it on the 3rd try. All right, let me put my needle down into the down position. Everything is in its place up there. Let's put this back in under the needle, foot down, and let's go. Try not to go so fast. I don't want to break the thread. And now I'm going to attach my last block, making sure that I keep it in the same direction as the previous printed block. Oops. Yes, they're all in the same direction. Let's just continue sewing this. Last block in this row. Let's make sure that everything is even and not out of whack. And I have now completed row 1. Again, I'm not taking the number off. I'm not taking the number off of this because I want to make sure that I have all my rows in order correctly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to sew a couple of more rows together, or a couple of more rows of blocks together, and I'll come back and show you what my progress is. Well, hi there, I'm back. It's maybe been 15-20 minutes that I've completed 5 rows of sewing blocks together with 2 stops. One stop was because, of course, the thread broke, my jinx, and the second time was because I ran out of bobbin thread. So technically, realistically, you probably could make a decent sized rag quilt in one evening, maybe 2 with the cutting process. But I just wanted to let you know that I was at row 5 and I'm about to do 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and I'll come back to you once I've got all those rows completed. And now I have my 10 rows completed with 7 blocks sewn across. 7 blocks sewn across. And what I want to do now is I want to connect my rows together. So obviously this is row 1. Row 2 will be below. Let me see, let me adjust this a little bit better so that you can see what I'm doing here. There you go. There you go. So I'm going to take my row 2 and I'm going to connect it to my row 1. This is the way I'm going to do it. This is how I prefer to do it. I figured this out when I was doing the little lap blanket for the car. I am going to, first of all, make sure that my seams are as close as possible, that they're even up and down, and I'm going to open up my seams. This is one of the few times that I go ahead and I use pins to secure because I don't want anything to be moving around. So I'm just going to put 2 pins, one on each side of the seam allowance, one on each side of the seam allowance. I'm going to try to get it as equal as possible. I probably will put one at the very beginning and one at the very end. Like I said, I don't like to use pins because they distort most of the time. Open up my seam. I'm not going to iron them open because I don't want them ironed open. I just want them open. And you can see right here that it's a little bit off, but I don't care. This particular rag quilt is just going to be a thrown together rag quilt. We'll see how it works when it's washed and dried. If I really notice a big difference of how the ragging looks, then for the next quilt I make, I will start squaring off my rows, not so much my blocks. But for the meantime, this is the way I want to do it. Again, I'm opening up my seam allowances and I'm matching up the seams as best as I can. Opening up the seam allowance on both sides, in both rows, and I'm going to pin it. And I'm going to pin it. This might be a little bit tedious, but sometimes it has to happen when you want to make sure that your stuff comes out decent. All right. My seam allowance on row 1 is a little bit short right here, as you can see. It's a little bit on the short side. That's my crazy sewing. It should have been an inch, but it didn't work out that way. Repin this so I get it. There we go. Got 2 more seams that I need to put together. And what I'm going to do is only sew 2 rows at a time. The row that needs to be added on to the piece is 1, and then the piece itself is 2. So of course, as the quilt gets longer, I'm going to have to decide which side. I may not be able to alternate to make sure that the seam is not buckling. I may just have to put all the excess material to the left of me because that's where I have more room on my machine, even though I do have a wider bed or wider arm space. But as we go along, I will see. All right, now I've pinned the row together. And now we're going to move over to the machine. Okay, here we are at the machine. I've got my fabric underneath. I have my pin cushion next to me to my right. I'm going to take out my first pin and place it in there. And now I'm going to go ahead and start sewing my rows together. Again, it's 3/4 to an inch of seam allowance. Now we're to the part where I'm going to have to take out the other pin. I've got my stiletto ready to make sure that this fold goes underneath, or this seam allowance goes underneath the presser foot. Pull out the next pin. Now you notice I'm making the machine go a little bit faster. Alright, didn't have that ready. There you go. Saved in time. I'm already seeing that I'm going to have a problem with my bottom row, that it's starting to fold up a little. So I'm going to have to be careful when I take the pin out, because it's going to make a big bend in it. There we go. The fold is out. Take the pin out. Want to make sure that everything is nice and even. Make sure that it's still sewing. Got to pin this last edge right here. Okay, pull the pin out. Want to make sure everything is in place. Remember, we're not back stitching, because once we put the final threading or sewing seam allowance all the way around, it'll lock everything into place. Okay, so now I have my row 1 and row 2 put together. Sorry. I now have my row 1 and row 2 put together right here, as you can see. Now I have 8 more rows to put together. The seam is going to be standing up like this. Once I'm done sewing, I'll cut all the strings off, and then I'll do the clipping. So let me sew a couple of more rows together, and I'll come back to you once I'm done with that. So I'm ready to attach row number 5 to the 4 rows that I've put together. And I already have a big bundle of mess, so what I did was I rolled up the end that I'm not sewing to, and I put these big giant clips on to help me maneuver the thickness of what I'm working on over here on this side. So, going to attach row number 5. I'll come back to you in a bit. I've completed the 8 rows now, and I'm wondering if I should add 9 and 10. It looks like a nice size. It's laying on top of a queen size bed, and again, I'm making this for me to use to wrap around when I'm sitting on my chair. So I may just stop here with the 8 rows, and those 2 other rows I'll add on to the lap quilt that I made for the car. Well, we just finished sewing all these blocks and rows together, and now it's time to put it to the side for a little bit, and we're at the conclusion of part 3. Part 4 of my journey, we're going to finish up this rag quilt by clipping it, making the rag parts. I'm going to throw it in the wash, and then I'm going to dry it, and then we're going to see the completed rag quilt. Not only this one, but the one that I am making for the car as a lap quilt. I'm Liz. This is EMO's Creative Studio, where anything you create is beautiful because you created it. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. Happy quilting, happy sewing, and until the next time, take care. Bye.